Hello, I'm going to be doing a narrated tutorial for this Tiger tank drawing as well. I'm mostly going to be focusing on the tank itself, and I'm going to skip over the parts where I drew the background. So here, as you can see, I started working on the background and I put down some charcoal to suggest the shapes of some trees and bushes. But now I'm going to grab a medium charcoal pencil and I'm going to start working on the gun. I'm drawing the muzzle, which is going to be the most complex part of the gun here. And like I said, I'm using a medium charcoal pencil because it's generally better for drawing details than the soft one, and it holds the tip a little bit better, and it can be sharpened a little bit better. Now I'm drawing the gun. The Tiger tank had a very large, powerful 88mm gun, not to be confused with the 88mm anti-aircraft and anti-tank gun, which was widely used during the Second World War, but this, even though this is the same caliber, it's a different gun designed for this tank. You can see that I drew a little bit of the turret here, and I'm working on the mantlet. I'm going to have a couple of guys on top of the tank. Like I said, I'm working on this gun mantlet now and drawing some of the details on the turret. These are the smoke discharges. They are used to create a smoke screen when the vehicle is vulnerable or under attack. And this here is the commander's hatch. The guy standing there is going to be the tank commander. I'm just gonna do a rough sketch of these two guys. I'm not gonna do a very detailed drawing of them for now. I'm gonna be trying to add a little more detail later. These are the lights. And now I'm drawing the front upper plate. And I didn't really have a proper reference photo. I mean, I didn't have a single reference photo. Now I'm drawing the gun mount, the machine gun mount. The machine gun used on this tank and on most German armor was MG34. The MG42, which was introduced later, was more widely used among infantry, but the MG34 remained the main option for mounting on the armored vehicles. I don't know why. Maybe it had some advantages, maybe it was just cheaper that way. So I'm shading this front plate. And like I said, I didn't have a single reference photo, but I just decided to do a simplified background and focus on the tank. I decided that my light source was going to be coming roughly from above and the right side, so from behind the tank. And that's why this front plate is so dark in comparison to the rest of the tank, because it's facing the opposite direction. As you can see, I'm shading this gun so that it's lighter in the middle, so that I can create an illusion that it is round. just shading it a little bit and adding some detail to it. You can see that I'm using two things for shading. I'm using this brush and I'm using a paper tortillon. I already told you in a couple of other videos that I make these tortillons myself, and they can be used for precise blending. Now I've moved on to the tracks. The Tiger tank had very large, very broad, wide tracks, and the tracks are very complex with a lot of parts, but I'm not going to be drawing every single bit. I'm just gonna use my shading to create an illusion of detail, just suggest some of the basic shapes. I'm gonna do a little bit of drawing with a charcoal pencil and draw a few highlights with a pencil eraser, and hopefully that'll sell it, that'll get the job done and make it look realistic. I think you'll see here and on many other parts of the tank that one of the keys when drawing, one of the key things when drawing tanks and metal stuff in general is to have a great range of value and a lot of contrast, so that it looks like some parts of it are shiny, others very dark, but there's also a lot of these sharp angles and edges. That's why we need a lot of contrast. I'm drawing the lower front plate, and I'm going to put some spare tracks on the front part of the hull. This was common practice among German tank crews. And putting the spare tracks there was probably convenient. It was probably a convenient place to carry them, but maybe it also added some additional protection. Not that the German Tiger tank needed any more protection on the front plate, because the front plate was really thick. This tank was quite a shock to the Allies when it was first introduced. I first thought that the tank appeared in Northern Africa first, late in 1942. And I'm pretty sure that was the first time it saw action, but I later read that some of them were also deployed in autumn of 1942 around Leningrad. I'm not really sure if they saw any action, maybe they did. But the ones in Africa had some clashes with the Allied forces in late 1942, early 1943, and the Allies were naturally shocked to see such a large vehicle with such thick armor and such a strong high velocity gun. You can see that I drew the tank commander, and now I'm shading the sides of the turret. The Tiger tank had a very large. This hatch here is, I believe, the driver's hatch, the lid of that driver's hatch. I started talking about the turret. The turret was very large because it needed to house the crew and the gun, but its flaw was that it was relatively slow. It turned relatively slowly. This is the driver's viewport. So the machine gun port or the machine gun mount is on the left, or on the right, depending on which side you're looking at it from. And on the other side there is the driver's viewport. Now I'm going to shade this part a little bit and work a little bit on those spare tracks. You can see that I'm going to try to create a lot of contrast here so that I have some of these highlight some of these really white parts which stand out against the darker areas, because I want them to look like they're made of metal, so shiny with a lot of contrast. So like I said, the Tiger tank was a shock to allies in North Africa, because you can see that I did a little bit more of the background here, and now I'm drawing the mudguards. I did some bushes because I need to work on the background simultaneously. I need to do some of the background to be able to gauge the values and to get some clean edges on the tank as well. And I did a little bit of the road as well. I'm going to try to draw the road so that it's a dirt road which looks like many vehicles have already passed there, and I'm going to draw some shadow under the tank to integrate the tank into the background. So like I said, the tank was a great shock for the Allied tanks because they were mostly Shermans with weaker 75mm guns which didn't have much penetration. I believe that the first Tiger tank that was actually knocked by the Allies was destroyed in early 1943 by an anti-tank gun, not an actual Allied tank. Some of the British 6-pounders could penetrate German Tiger tanks at a closer range. I'm finishing the shading on this gun. You can see that it does look like it's made of metal. I'm just going to clean up the top edge a little bit and shade it a little bit more. It looks like it's made of metal. There's a lot of contrast on it, especially on the muzzle. But you can see that I'm doing most of this freehand. I'm not using a ruler. This is my style, or my approach, if you want to call it that. I don't really like doing technical drawings. You can see that I'm simplifying a lot of the things, and some of the modelers out there who do detailed model kits would probably say that this is very sloppy, but this is an artistic rendition of a Tiger tank in charcoal, which is not a great medium for precision to begin with. But I don't really like anything like technical drawings, so this is more of a type of drawing that I like to do. It's still going to look better once I clean up the edges and refine some of the details. You can see that I'm getting a lot of contrast on these spare tracks here, and they do appear like they're made of metal. The Tiger tanks also saw most of their action on the Eastern Front, mostly against the Russian, or Soviet rather, T-34s. They were greatly outnumbered, but then again the Russian tanks were greatly outgunned and also outmatched in terms of the amount of armor protection, or at least in those earlier stages of the war. I believe that you can see that I'm also using a white gel pen to add a few details here and there, but I use that very sparingly and I usually blend over most of it. Also, you can see that on the front part of the hull, I just under the machine gun opening, I suggested the shape of a shovel. You'll see that a lot of additional equipment was put on these tanks, like this shovel that I'm working on now, or maybe some towing cables and other stuff. You can later see some towing cables on the side armor of the tank and also around the engine block. So there's some stuff on it. These two guys are a little bit simplified, but I'm gonna need to add a few details to them. So like I said, this is more like a longer narrated tutorial. I occasionally do these, and I sometimes do both the short time lapses and the longer narrated videos. I'm gonna put the link to the time-lapse video for this drawing in the description. I'm adding a few touches to the gun mantlet and making it a little bit more detailed and a little more interesting. And also shading some of these parts on the front plate. Like I said, the front plate needs to be a little bit darker because it's facing away from the light source. All of the surfaces that are facing upwards need to be a lot lighter, and I need a lot of contrast in order to make it look like a real tank. Anyway, I said that I occasionally do both the time-lapse version and the narrated tutorial version. Some people prefer very short videos, short time lapses with music, but I've noticed that some people also like longer commentaries, especially when it comes to landscape drawings. I didn't really want to focus on the landscape part of this scene because, like I said, I made the background a little bit simpler, plus that's not really the focus of this video, so I'm mostly going to be skipping over those parts and focusing on the tiger. As some of you know, there was another later version of a tank called Tiger 2 tank, or King Tiger, which was even larger, had even bigger, larger tracks, heavier vehicle, which was even more prone to mechanical problems. Now moving on to the other side of the vehicle, and I'm drawing the other mud guard, and I'm going to be drawing the tracks on this side now. Occasionally I go over the areas that I already shaded and add a little bit more texture. This is the sprocket. And now I'm suggesting the shapes of some wheels and working a little bit more on those details around the sprocket. These areas in between the wheels are going to be really dark, so I'm using a lot of charcoal and a little bit more pressure there. And also shading this area under the gun and under the mantlet and around the turret ring, which is also a lot darker because there's no light there. And now I'm drawing these tracks. I'm going to use the same approach as with the other ones. Just try to create the illusion of detail and using a large range of value and a lot of contrast to make it look metallic and realistic. I shaded the side of the turret. I'm going to be putting some numbers and some insignia there, but at the time I still hadn't decided what to put down. There. Now I'm just scribbling a little bit on this other side to suggest the shapes of some bushes. But before I do that, of course, I'm going to need to finish the tank and this road. I shaded this road. It's a dirt road. And now I'm drawing a shadow underneath the tank so that it looks a little more real, like it's really there. And I'm trying to make the shadow look like it's, coming from this tank, so trying to follow the shape of and the width of the vehicle. I just made the area under the tank a little bit darker. Now I'm working on the side of the armor. I'm going to simplify this part in the back around those exhaust pipes and the engine blocks, because that's not really visible. There are some cables here, like I said. I'm gonna draw those. More of these mud guards and side armor. And now, like I said, I need to make this area between the wheels really dark. You'll see later that I'll also try to create a little bit of a camel, but because it's black and white and because the tank is supposed to be dusty and dirty, I'm not going to be creating any clean, clean edges, but rather just suggest that there are some darker areas which kind of look like a camel. I wanted this tank to look like it's somewhere in Western Europe, in France, in Normandy perhaps, because the foliage around it looks like one of those hedges in Normandy, hedgerows. And those tanks usually had some kind of a camo, which was a combination of yellow, green and brown. Two of the crew, like I said, are visible, the tank commander and the other guy. Probably the most famous tank crew. I'm going to do a little bit of background here. Probably the most famous tank crew, at least in popular culture, is that of Wittmann, the tank commander who was known or notorious for destroying an Allied armored column around the Ville Bocage when the Allies were trying to capture Caen. But Wittmann also fought on the Eastern Front as well. His crew was very experienced and they had a good tank. So they inflicted some heavy losses on the Allies. Wittmann's tank was later destroyed later in 44, I think, either by a side hit by a British Firefly tank, or some people also claim that it was destroyed by a rocket from one of the Allied airplanes. I don't really know which of these two was the case. Like I said, I'm using this pencil eraser and the kneaded eraser to pull some highlights here on those tracks. You want to make them look dirty, but at the same time you want to make some parts of them look shiny so that whoever is looking at the drawing can feel that there is metal there. I wanted the vehicle to look large, heavy and menacing, and hopefully by the time I'm done I'm going to be able to accomplish that look. Just shading the lower parts of the tracks a little bit and adding a little bit of texture here and there, because I don't want the tank to look too clean or neat. That's actually helping me because, like I said, I'm not very good at drawing precise things. Cleanliness is not really what I'm good at. You can see that I'm also going in with a black colored pencil occasionally to add some detail, but also to clean up some of the edges. The black colored pencil is far more precise and can be sharpened better, so it can be used to add some detail, some finer detail. The mudguards are throwing a shadow onto the tracks, so I'm shading this area a little bit darker, and then again using my eraser to pull some highlights here and there. I felt like I needed to make this area under the tank a little bit darker because of the shadow. I occasionally use a brush to soften some of the areas I shaded. And you can see that now I'm adding some camel on top. I'm going to add some patches of color here and there. I drew a number 331 on the side. Not really sure if it existed and where it was used, but you know, doesn't really matter. I'm not going for historical authenticity. It's not really that important to me. But there probably was such a tank. Now I'm going to shade the area behind the tank and maybe add some tracks in the road, and then maybe add some smoke effects a little bit. But first I need to shade these road wheels a little bit. You can see that I've cleaned up a lot of the edges, and I've done most of the work on the tank. It looks pretty good. I shaded most of the background and done most of those bushes, but you can see that I'm now using my erasers to draw a little bit of dust and smoke behind the tank. I'm also gonna add a little bit of dirt being tossed in the air around the tracks to make it look a little more interesting. Like so. And I'm almost done with the drawing. This is what it looks like. Thank you for watching. I'm gonna sign it right here. And that's it.